Voice of San Diego podcasts are made possible in part by Downtown San Diego Partnership. 'Tis the season to make your change count at one of downtown San Diego's 26 red donation station meters. From providing homeless individuals with hygiene kits, new clothes, and meal cards, to helping those on the street take the first steps into permanent housing, your spare change can make a difference in the lives of those who need it most this holiday season. Visit downtownsandiego.org for more information and to donate today.
Welcome to the Voice of San Diego podcast, where we make sense of local politics, schools, housing, public safety, the civic issues that impact the life of a San Diego resident. We break it down so you can understand it and make educated decisions.
Everything that goes into our investigative reporting, the journalists, public records requests, the data crunching, and this very show depends on the support of people like you because we're a nonprofit news organization. Enjoy the show.
All right. Hello to all of our friends listening on News Radio 600 Kogo. This is the Voice of San Diego on the radio, and I am Andrew Keatts, and I'm joined by just one person, the only person on the show that I'd like to be joined with right now, my friend Sara Libby.
What's up, dude?
How are you?
Doing great.
Scott's not here. Scott's out in Philadelphia.
It's like gallivanting.
He's begging.
Gonna come back talking about the wonders of cheesesteak and the city of Philadelphia like he's the first person to ever experience these.
He has been sending me photos of like the most quintessential Philadelphia sites. Like, right. Yeah, I've seen it. They have a very pretty city hall.
I feel obligated, though, to admit to everyone that he had a very sick burn of our friend Liam Dillon, who's also from Philadelphia, which is that so far no one here has ever heard of you.
That's good. That's a good.
That was good.
Yeah.
Good job, Scott.
All right. So we made a joke a couple weeks ago that we did basically intend as a joke.
Yeah, I'm really proud of us for including this caveat that was a joke at the time, sort of.
Right. So we spoke recently about the fact that the city was moving towards approving a set of regulations for short-term vacation rentals, mostly Airbnb. And we mentioned towards the end of that segment that this has been going on for 3 years, and every time it's come forward to the city council, they have punted, and people in general seem to show no real interest in solving this problem. A lot of people with at cross motivations, and we did include the possibility that nothing at all would be decided and that they would punt yet again. And then after a 10-hour meeting, 10 hours with hundreds of people who came down to voice their concerns. Again for the second time, almost a year to the date. Yeah. They decided nothing. They've made no conclusions. We're in the same situation we were in before, which, to go over it, is that the city attorney has declared that short-term vacation rentals are illegal. Right. And the mayor has decided that we will not enforce that illegal behavior because we don't have the means to do so. And so this
meaningless ban on the books that means nothing, and nothing's decided.
And that's the netherworld we're in. And so what do we say about this? What do we say about the state of this city and the city council specifically and city staff in general?
So
to solve anything.
One of the reactions that I thought was the most interesting was a statement that Chris Cate put out, so a member of this body, and it included the very simple, elegant phrase, "We cannot govern."
Yes, I agree. This was a good statement. This was an appropriate statement. I'll actually just read the whole thing. He said, "After nearly 3 years since my office provided its initial proposal on home sharing and short-term rentals, today's inaction has proved that as a city council, we cannot govern. Time and time again, the council has heavily relied on special interest and ballot initiatives to pass major public policy. Much has been said about dysfunctional DC-style politics. However, it's happening in our own backyard."
Yeah, so we did have like the brilliant foresight to say, just so you know, maybe nothing will happen. Yeah. But, up until a few weeks ago, it did look to everybody, including us, like this proposal from 4 members of the council was almost a sure thing, right? And it turned out not to be.
And it turned out not to be for a reason that I don't think anybody could have reasonably predicted, which is that one of the 4 people who signed on to the memo to get it to the city council in the first place did not vote for that proposal.
Right. It wasn't that they couldn't secure one more vote,
Yeah.
because it seems like they definitely could have.
Yeah, it was, they lost one of the people. I mean, and his reasoning was like, well, these provisions in this memo are not full and complete. It's like, but you signed on to the memo.
Right.
This is Councilman David Alvarez, who signed on to this 4-person memo with the outlines of that proposal, which was seen as the less restrictive of between the 2 that were before the city council. And his primary cited issue with it was that it spelled out the concept of a fee that would be charged to short-term vacation rentals that would be used to build affordable housing. But that fee was not finished. It was not complete. It was not fully baked at the time that they were going to go to the city council. And he said that was essentially a deal breaker for him. And there was this one moment where Barbara Bree, who was the chief proponent of the more restrictive proposal, was trying to win over votes. And she basically, there was a motion to approve her ballot measure. And when it was clear that she didn't have 5 votes, she just openly said, I mean, there was like this interesting moment where they were creating sausage.
Absolutely.
Live.
Yeah, no, they absolutely were. They were trying to take her proposal and say, well, that's the one that we'll go off of and build.
Yeah, and she just said to Councilman Alvarez, she said, well, what can we do to get you to yes? What are the amendments we could make to get you to yes? And they just start going through some, and she's like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, she made some pretty big concessions to her plan.
And it was exciting for a moment. I was like, this is actually interesting. There's leadership and comity, and they're actually hashing out the give and take of policymaking live for us. And it seemed like they were going to get to yes. At least it seemed to me, because I'm an idiot. And of course they didn't get to yes. But he said during this one part of the exchange, she said, well, what if I took the affordable housing fee proposal from this other measure and put it in mine? Would that get you to yes? And he said, well, no, because we don't have a full study done for that fee that would allow us to vote for it yet. And I need that to be finalized before I vote yes. And she said, well, that means you can't vote for the other one, right? And he said, that's true. It was like, what? So, okay, so we're basically done here.
Exactly. Beyond the intrigue of like, it's fun to watch this like play out in real time, it also seems like very disingenuous and also not how it's really supposed to work. If you think back to a few weeks ago when City Attorney Mara Elliott, came in with this last minute, I'm like air quoting, because it was, several days before the council meeting, but was last minute by those standards, saying there might be legal issues with some of the pieces of this proposal, and everyone freaked out that she had dropped this bomb, including David Alvarez. And then here he is literally in the middle of the meeting saying, well, I can't possibly vote for this because of
compared
X,
to what
Y,
happened
Z.
Tuesday. Mara Elliott's memo a month ago was like absurdly long forewarning.
Exactly.
So then he goes away, and then it looked like Chris Ward, who was also one of the signers of the 4-person memo, looked like he might be the 5th vote for Barbara Bree's proposal. And he's asking for something, and then this was the part where it started to become clear that it wasn't going to pass, and it started to become clear that this isn't a great way to make policy, because they were hashing out how they were going to who was going to be allowed essentially to have short-term vacation rentals. And there was going to be some requirement that you'd have to be able to prove that you were a resident of San Diego County to get one of these. Like you could get one if you lived, you could get one in general, but
Yeah, the
not
big overarching concern is like these investment companies that are like impersonal and
have like 15 or
10,
20 and whatever. And so the people were talking about these anecdotal situations. So, well, what about a couple who owns a condo and then they buy a house and now they've got two and they want to keep the other one? And they're just hashing it out in real time going, well, okay, so we could have a 1+1 for that situation, but otherwise you just get the one. And it's like, man, there's a full, like, hundreds of thousands of people that work for city staff that's job is to go over issues like this to make sure that there's not some unforeseen circumstance that you just wrote into a law.
Right.
But
none of that is happening.
But 3 years into this process, we're just going to do it on the fly.
Right.
Like, it's actually very reminiscent of the Republican tax bill, which has like major deductions written into the margins by hand.
Exactly.
So this was the write in the margins by hand version of short-term vacation rentals. Okay, so that was one explosive.
Was that the most San Diego thing to ever San Diego?
It was incredibly San Diego. Interestingly, also, like, the complete absence of the mayor.
Yeah.
Like, this is all happening, and like the mayor wasn't part of it. It's not
Right.
like anybody was like calling up, like, oh, could a representative from Mayor Faulkner come down and tell us where he stands on this?
Yeah, and that's why I thought it's been so kind of bizarre to see him making these proclamations now, in the aftermath of this failure that, well, I'm going to step in now, as if he hasn't also been the mayor for the last 3 years.
Yes, and so the whisper campaign that I've heard on this is that he would have been happy to lead previously.
Okay.
But the city council said, no, this is a district by district issue, and this is really the work of the city council. And so he took a passive stance to appease them, and now he's saying, well, you've proven you can't do it, so now I'll assert myself. I provide that piece of information without judgment. That's just the thing that people are saying. Okay, so there's that. The other thing this week, though, of course, was, since we last recorded, really, was the Lilac Fire.
Yeah.
In northern San Diego County, which was a pretty serious fire. Really, I mean, it was 0% contained, which we can go over what that means, but 0% contained for days, and burned many structures, and was, the most serious fire we've had at this stage in a year in quite a long time.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that we always sort of talk about as a news organization, being that we don't really cover breaking news. We're not equipped to send people out to shelters and things like that for the most part. But
it's not really what people come to us for, and it's also not really what we're best equipped to do well.
Right, but that being said, so it is called the Lilac Fire.
It is called the Lilac Fire.
And there is one piece of this that we have covered aggressively for a few years, which is this development, Lilac Hills.
Yeah.
So tell us what you found a few years ago investigating Lilac Hills, and specifically what their response and reaction was to the threat of wildfires.
Yeah, so the developers behind Lilac Hills, we reported a couple years ago, they were trying to build thousands of homes in kind of out by Valley Center in West Lilac Road. And because their proposal did not fit within the county's general plan, they wanted to build like 1,500 homes in an area that was zoned for 100 homes. Because they needed to do that, they needed to go through this lengthy process. And as part of that lengthy process to get approved, one of the things that could happen to them is they could have additional restrictions and regulations imposed upon them. And that could have been done either by the Planning Commission or by the County Board of Supervisors. And there were a number of potential problems that one might have with Lilac Hills, but one of them was that the road structure that it was being built on and the existing infrastructure in terms of fire preparedness and prevention was not adequate for the number of people that would potentially live there if they built this project. And so the Planning Commission, the county's Planning Commission, when it recommended to approve the project. It said, despite all these problems, we think we should approve it. However, you have to increase the capacity of this main road, because if you don't, you might have evacuation problems in the event of a fire.
People are stuck.
A traffic jam when people are trying to get out for a fire. And you should pay for the building of a new fire station, because there's not going to be adequate coverage in the event of a fire. And this project is one of a handful of projects proposed in the county that's in this invisible line where like sagebrush and highly flammable areas meet up with civilization, and it's right there where you have the greatest amount of fire hazard. When you have a lot of building, the fire hazard goes way back down. But it's those first developments, those first projects that are on this urban line, the urban wildlife line. So
there are a lot of other Lilac Hills, so to speak. So there's Newland Sierra. There are all these developments before the County Board of Supervisors now that could, if all of them were built to their capacity, add 6,000 homes to this area that is at incredibly high risk for the types of fires that we saw this week.
Right, exactly. And then you get into this circumstance where, to decrease the fire hazard, what you would want to do is build even more, because that's how you decrease the chances of this happening. And so you create this incentive where it's like, well, if we're gonna build out there, then we should probably build a lot out there. Otherwise, we're in this wildfire risk area, as opposed to following this general plan that we've adopted that does accommodate housing growth in already developed areas. The alternative to developing in wildfire-prone areas is developing in already developed areas. This was called the Lilac Fire because it was a very short distance, a matter of hundreds of feet from where the Lilac Hills project would be. I mean, it wasn't named after Lilac Hills. That area is West Lilac Road runs through it, etc. But if you map out the confines of the fire that just happened, it's just a few hundred feet across a freeway from where the Lilac Hills Ranch proposal would be. Had it been approved 2 years ago, they would have been in construction probably just downstream from the flames.
Yeah, and it's still alive, which maybe people aren't necessarily aware of. So it did get shot down as a ballot measure, but it's still before the County Board of Supervisors in some form, just like a lot of these other big projects are.
Yeah, the County Board of Supervisors never voted this project down previously. It kind of just got put on hold while they pursued the citizens initiative, and so now it's still a live project. It could come back at some point. All right. Anyway, let's move on to our hero of the week.
All right. So we're giving this one once again to some new women who have come forward to talk about their experiences at La Jolla High School. Our reporter Ashley McGlone has been investigating accusations against one teacher specifically who's now retired, who several women have said groped them in the classroom and acted very strangely and inappropriately. So Ashley reported this week that at least 2 more students have come forward to talk about, their experiences with this teacher, and they saw him behaving inappropriately toward other students. And, one was particularly hard to listen to because she said that this teacher kind of brushed up or touched her breast and it made her feel really uncomfortable, and she decided to go to her parents to tell them about this, and her parents said, I'm sure it was just an accident. And her thinking after that was, well, if my parents don't believe me, then what's the point in going to the principal or taking this any further? And that was just really, I think, emblematic of a lot of the hurdles that, some of these people face, especially when you're so young and just aren't sure what to do. So I'm just really glad that Ashley's continuing to reach out and to hear from people.
That's the the ongoing lesson I'm getting from some of Ashley's stories about the situation is how young these girls were and the lessons they learned going into the like nascent stages of their life in college and the beginning of career. Like, if you have this experience, what else would you believe? But when you were in college and your early parts of your career, that this is just the way the world is.
Right.
All right, and our GOAT of the week.
You lose! Good day, sir!
So Greg Morin over at the Union Tribune had a fantastic story this week about some, I guess essentially some hiring and retention problems at the
It's one way to say it.
at the Customs and Border Patrol, which, you know, hiring and recruitment, stuff that we're very familiar with here in San Diego. So they have to hire 5,000 new Border Patrol agents because they're already in a situation where agents are leaving faster than they can find and hire them. They have brought on a private company at the cost of $297 million just to help them staff up to the level that President Trump has mandated that they staff up to.
It's
Astounding. Anyway, that is it from us this week at Voice of San Diego Radio. Thank you to our friends at News Radio 600 Kogo. If you're on the podcast hangout, we're talking to Ellen Montanari. She organizes the daily, weekly, regular protests outside of Congressman Darrell Iss's office. All right, and lastly, we are still in the last closing stages of our fundraising push. The December month is huge for us. We bring in about 30% of all the money we raise over the course of the year during this month. It's hugely important. If you like this show and you listen on the radio, if you like this show on your podcast, if you like our website and the articles we write, if you don't like those things and want them to be better, please do us a solid. Go to voiceofsandiego.org/donate and kick us a few bucks, whatever you can afford, whatever you think is appropriate. It will help us greatly. And because it's what we do here. It's listener supported, it's reader supported. And if you don't pay for local news, I promise you it will go away. Anyway, thank you. Stick around for the podcast portion of the show with Ellen Montanari.
Sponsoring the podcast today is Sempra Services. Greenhouse gas emissions impact us all. In this new podcast series, former San Diego County Planning Commissioner and renewable energy and transportation expert Peter Norby explores best practices for reducing greenhouse gases and making real progress toward a healthier future on the local level. In this episode, Norby sits down with a renowned economist and Point Loma Nazarene professor, Dr. Lynn Reeser, to discuss the implications of government-controlled energy in San Diego. Visit sempraservices.com to learn more and tune into the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.
All right, now we're joined in the VOSD podcast studio by Ellen Montanari, who leads the rallies that have been happening for the last almost a year, right? Outside of Congressman Darrell Iss's office in Vista. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm working now on all these, year-end stories that we put together to close out the year, and I can't believe it's been almost like a year since the Women's March, 11 months and things like that. So it's a good time to kind of look back on what's gone down over the last year. And I was thinking about the Women's March, and that was probably, like the high point in terms of activism and protests that I've ever seen in my lifetime. So what's it like now, 11, 12 months removed from that, organizing these protests? Is there momentum still?
Well, there certainly is up in Vista in District 49. I agree with you, and I'm substantially older than you are. And the march, I went to the march in D.C., the Women's March. I grew up in Washington, and I remember marching during the Vietnam War, and I thought, I was so devastated after the election, and I needed a boost. And so I decided, there's nothing like a march in D.C. So I went, and it was not like anything I have ever attended before. And it really was, probably for a number of people, it was the impetus to really get me involved and active. And to answer your question again, the momentum is still going. I never would have expected this many months into the year that people would still be out in front of his office, but they are.
So can you take us to the beginning of that specific protest, your decision to go to his office so often? Where did the idea come from, and how did you start doing it?
Well, it actually started back in December. On December 20th, I did a rally out in front of his office. I had never done one before, but Move On had asked me to do one. They asked me, I guess, because I had been doing some texting for them before the election. And so I decided to do this rally. They had found out that the GOP was planning on, there's a recess for the holidays, and then there's a recess for the inauguration. There's a short time in between there when Congress is in session. And what they found, Move On found out that the GOP was planning on passing the repeal of the ACA during that recess. So the first day that Trump was in office, he could sign that legislation. And they said, we can't stop this train, but maybe we can slow it down. Little did they know how much they could slow it down. And so I said, yeah, I'll do that. I've never done a rally before. They said, we'll provide you help. Well, the help I got was about a 5-page handout. And it's like, oh my gosh. And I give myself that first rally, 30 people came. And I had one local newspaper. I think it was the Rancho Santa Fe News came. And I give myself about a C- on that one. So then when they started to do Resist Trump Tuesdays, I thought, why should all that knowledge that I gained in doing this go to waste? So I'll do one. Mm-hmm. And then there was another one. They decided to do, Move On wanted to sponsor rallies out in front of offices every Tuesday for the first 100 days of Trump's presidency. So I did one, and then I looked online to see who was going to do the next one, and nobody was doing it. So I said, yeah, I'll sign up. And then the next one, and then the next one. And then all of a sudden there we were, having hundreds of people out in front of his office. And what made them continue on is it was the week before the last rally of 100 days. And I announced to the crowd, next week will be our last rally. And all of a sudden I hear this, no, coming out from the crowd. I was like, what's going on? And so, I gave the microphone to another speaker, and I started walking around. People were grabbing me and saying, you have to keep doing these. You have to keep doing these. And I was like, yeah. Because, I was kind of tired. I have kids. I had a job. I was ready to stop. And then I got an email from one of the rally participants, and she said, Ellen, we sit in front of our TV sets and yell and throw things. He says, but every Tuesday after the rally, we are filled with hope and joy. And I said, okay, I will do that.
You got the guilt trip.
I did.
How did so tell me about pulling together that first group of 30. How'd you find that seed of that grew from?
Well, those were actually Move On members.
Okay.
So that was actually pretty easy. But then Move On started working more with the
senators. So you had like a Move On listserv or something like that you were...
They did it.
Oh, they did it.
They did it.
Okay.
Yeah. And my job was simply to respond to them and tell them what I needed and all the volunteers that didn't show up and all of that sort of thing to help set it up.
Gotcha.
So...
Okay.
So obviously the impetus for this was the election and a lot of those initial decisions coming out of D.C. There was the immigration ban, and you mentioned healthcare were big issues. So do you feel like the rallies outside of Congressman Issa's office are more directed at Trump, or are they specifically about Issa, and is it a mix? And is there something specific that you're seeking from Darrell Issa that you feel like you haven't gotten yet?
That's really good questions. I can only tell you why I started it. I started it because this is a very large state, and I wanted to know what was going on in Washington. And being such a large state, I knew that the senators would not be responsive. They can't be with a state this size, but that's what our representative is for. So I started this first so that I could maybe hear from Issa, what's going on in Washington? Tell us about this guy. I was frightened and concerned and puzzled, and I thought, that's what our representative is there for, is to help us with that. So initially, we all started out really, really wanting to talk to him. And it has evolved since then because he finally did start coming out and talking to us.
Sometimes in bizarre ways. I feel like I remember he was on the
On the
roof
roof
one
once?
time.
Yeah.
He was on the roof one time taking pictures of us. How odd is that anyway?
Yeah.
And what we found was that because I thought, again, such a small margin of victory, that he would be more open to listening to his constituents, that he probably learned that, because what representatives want more than anything else is to get reelected. And what we found was he was not interested in talking with us or listening. He was more interested in talking at us, belittling us, patronizing us. He actually bullied me personally. That was the day on the roof. And at that point, and it was only at that point that I decided I didn't care if he ever talked to me again personally. I was going to work and do anything I could to get somebody else in that office. Well, I had never voted for him. I never had hard feelings about it, but I've never been treated the way I've been treated by him and by his staff.
Yeah, what was your impression of him just as a constituent before 2016? I mean, obviously, I would assume that you doesn't sound like you have a broad agreement with his overall ideology, but that's only part of it. There's also constituent services and that sort of thing. Had you had much of a impression of him as a congressman before?
I had zero impression, actually. I didn't really much pay attention. I'd maybe read a few things and I didn't really care for his stands, but I think I was very much like the average voter who, I mean, I knew that I mostly voted either independent or Democratic, and I generally didn't vote Republican, but I honestly didn't know very much about him. So I truly went into this with an open mind and this naive feeling that he might be interested in really listening to the concerns of his constituents.
Mm-hmm. And so now, now this race we're getting ready to start 2018. There are a number of signs forming that are suggesting to people that there might be a real Democratic wave forming. And this race is going to be one of the most closely watched in the country. It already is, really. How are you feeling that? Are you feeling the eyes of the political world on this race and your sort of movement, for lack of a better word?
Absolutely. We've had CNN twice out at our rallies, which in my life I never thought I would see something like that. The Washington Post, the New York Times, we've been covered by almost every major news outlet so far, and that's just the rallies. I mean, that's people coming out for those. So for all of that level of activity and intensity to happen this far out from an election, I think is unprecedented. And what we do know is that we're the largest long-running rally in the country.
Yeah. Do you have any relationship with any of the Democratic candidates? Have you trying to talk to people like Paul Kerr, Mike Slater?
Well, they all come to the rallies. I have a really strict rule that there are no signs. No candidate or campaign signs, because we are focused on ISA. And I've said to each one of them and to their campaign managers very nicely, if you want a rally, go out and have one. But this is not yours. This is ours. This is for the people of the district, and we're here to talk to ISA, and that's it. You can be here. You can talk to people. I don't care what you do, but this isn't your rally. So none of them speak. We never have a candidate speak. But I've spoken to each one of them personally, and I like them. I like them all.
Would you consider endorsing?
Nope.
Not.
Was that quick enough for you?
Not under consideration.
No, for a number of reasons. I'm part of Indivisible 49, and our organization has decided that we will not endorse a candidate because it's not like some of the other districts where there are clear-cut best candidates. I think that each of the candidates is viable in their own way. So our stance is that with Indivisible 49 is that we will let the people decide in the district, and in June after the primary, we're all in for whoever it is that wins.
So does the protest operate today under the auspices of any specific group? So you've mentioned started with the help of Move On. You're part of Indivisible 49, which is a piece of the broader Indivisible nationally. There's also this other group, Flip the 49th, that is a political action committee, basically. Do you have any formal relationships with any of those groups for the like the rally itself?
Not for the rally itself. I happen to be one of the officers on Flip the 49th, the Political Action Committee, but that's because I do the rallies. And I was chosen to be an officer because I'm the one who is most in touch with that grassroots element that's so active in the 49th. So I'm there to provide that voice for them. So that's how I am involved with Flip. But when it comes to the rallies, no, there's no one group that sponsors it. That's what's so cool about it is, I just started it and I made sure that there was no one organization because organizations wanted to come and put their signs up. And I said, no, this is about ISA. This isn't about individual groups. It's not about Indivisible. It's not about Democratic clubs. It's not about the Sierra Club. It's about everybody. And all of those groups come. There's probably on any given day, I would say 20, 25 different groups represented.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that first rally, and it was a little like fly by the seat of your pants. And now here we are almost a year later. I know you guys have had some issues with the city of Vista itself, perhaps because of ISA's office or in addition to challenges that they may have posed. What are some of the lessons you've learned as far as like being efficient and organizing these in a way that kind of sidesteps some of those hurdles?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm a great delegator, and I really believe in turning big pieces of things over to people once they've shown that they have an interest and a will to do it. So I think the only way these have survived is that there's a team now of probably about 30 people who help organize the rallies. There's a really neat video that's on the Indivisible 49 YouTube channel that's a time lapse starting at 6:30 in the morning and goes till noon because the setup starts at 6:30 in the morning and goes, and the last truck pulls away around 12 o'clock. And I don't show up now anymore until about 9:30. The rally starts at 10, but we have a peace patrol, we have a setup group, we have musicians, we have a woman who writes parody songs for us every week. We have a guy who puts together a song list for us. Again, we have a different theme every week now. So, depending on the theme, somebody's writing songs, somebody's putting together a song list to play music before the rally starts. We have people who help find speakers. So it's a huge group of people now who participate in that.
Has it become something of a social circle?
Very much.
Yeah, because
yes.
I remember in like 2011, 2012, there would be a constant stream of like marriage announcements that were from people who met at the early stages of Tea Party rallies and that sort of thing. And I had, after the Women's March and Invisible groups started popping up all over the place, I was wondering if we were going to start to see a slate of that sort of thing on the left. So are you guys all very friendly?
Well, it's funny. We haven't seen any marriages or babies, so that would be news to me.
Yeah.
But yes, it's very interesting. I get emails now from people saying, oh, Ellen, I'm going to go visit my grandkids for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back. Or, Ellen, I've got some surgery, but I'll be back in about 3 weeks. And so people have that level of obligation that they feel and responsibility towards the group. People now talk to each other there, and they know each other, hugs, the whole thing. And it really has become a community.
Mm-hmm. And so the UT, Josh Stewart reported yesterday that some of the donors going in to flip the script were, some pretty big name people: Barbara Boxer, Leonardo DiCaprio, Bill Maher. Am I forgetting any?
Some other Hollywood types.
Like a lot of Hollywood types, basically. Bill Maher, interesting because Daryl Icey used to go on his show, I remember.
That's right.
Yeah, but I wonder, you've mentioned a couple times that the importance to you that this is a decentralized rally and that it has some grassroots underpinnings. When you see that type of money coming in from outside the district, do you feel at all concerned about losing that your own, ownership isn't the right word, but the tactile touch to the grassroots level?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Remember now, the rallies are separate from Flip.
Right.
Even so, it's really about the people of the 49th. And we're we're very aware that while money may come in from outside the district, it's the people of the district who decide how that money's going to be spent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone needs to be super clear about that. We're so excited that people are seeing that this is a winnable race. They know that Darrell Issa has impact outside of the 49th. His vote was the deciding vote on that repeal and replace bill in the House. He placed that vote that took him over the edge for repeal and replace. So his vote doesn't affect just us. It affects the entire country. And I think that's why we're getting money from both inside the district and outside the district.
Do you anticipate getting involved in any other races, including local races in 2018, beyond just the ISA and the campaign for the 49th?
Well, I have to tell you, personally, my energy is on ISA. That to me is the most important. Do I see other races? Absolutely. Am I supportive of some of the other races and some of the people in them? You bet. But when it comes to my personal energy, I'm giving everything I've got right now to ISA. I don't have a lot of bandwidth left over.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. What about, I'm always just curious, are you tapped in? Do you pay much attention to like super local politics, to Vista politics or North County Board of Supervisors, anything like that?
Not much.
Not much.
You know, I've not been a political person. I mean, this has been my first foray into it. And it's been interesting. I've met some amazing people. I think what's really important for me is how many people, Indivisible is a big tent, and these rallies are a big tent. We have a lot of Republicans who come, disenfranchised Republicans. We have a lot of independents who come and no party preference. And so people used to think it was just all Democrats, but it's not. And that's what I love about this. What I'm especially sad about are the people who can't come because they're afraid. And we know a lot of people, whether it's their gender identity, their race, their religion, their ethnicity, that are afraid to come out in front of his office. You should never, ever be afraid to come out in front of your representative's office.
So do they come to you privately, or they go to organizing groups, but they don't actually show up for the rallies?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. Well, Ellen Montanari, thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thank you for having me.
The Voice of San Diego podcast is part of the Voice of San Diego podcast network. Visit voiceofsandiego.org/podcast to learn more about the Cura Chaos show about movers and shakers on both sides of the border, Beer Talk Radio, our business shows Startup Vault and I Made It in San Diego, and the rest of the shows in the network. If you like the show, go to voiceofsandiego.org and click the donate button. Or if you'd like to sponsor it, contact me at kinsey@vosd.org. That's KINSEE@vosd.org.